In today's episode of the Platform Presents podcast, I'm here with Firdaush Bhadha, and he is hailing over as the marketing lead at Limelight Software. And essentially, today we're going to be learning what Limelight is all about. Because in the end, if you check out their website, golimelight.com, they're all about getting real-time planning, forecasting, reporting, out of your ERP. And it's really, giving you guys a much easier way to work with those data insights. And today we're going to be learning how Limelight works and who's benefiting the most and how Firdaush is thinking about growth for the company. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Very good. Yeah. Give us that 360 overview. What is Limelight all about?
Yeah, Limelight is a cloud-based web application that's designed from the ground up for finance roles. We essentially gather ERP or external finance data, creating a single source of truth. We then allow finance teams to then non-destructively manipulate that data for their forecast, budget scenarios. They can add comments, approvals, and write it within Limelight so they don't have to go back and do re-exports and imports every time they update data. And overall, we speed up decision-making and recommendations from the Office of Finance so that the rest of the business can actually take action as well from the finance teams. And because of that, finance teams become more productive, collaborative, and analytical for not just their departments, but for the entire company as well.
Yep. That makes sense. And who would you say is sort of that main user? Who is raising the hand within the companies and say, hey, we need something like Limelight?
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone in the Office of Finance will benefit. So management teams, CFOs, controllers, finance officers, and department managers. But like I was saying earlier, since finance teams will have an easier and quicker time to find those insights, other business units can make more confident decisions using their finance team's recommendations because we tend to streamline it, and therefore finance teams can spend more time on analysis. And therefore, their insights will be a little bit deeper, and then the other business units can get even deeper insights.
That makes sense. And how do these folks hear about Limelight? What's the channels that you guys are leveraging? And maybe we can sort of slowly moving into talking about how you're thinking about growth. I know you guys are taking a quite unique approach on how you think about marketing. Maybe tell us a little bit about sort of first the channels. What is sort of the main acquisition channels you guys leverage?
Yeah, much like many B2B companies, we're Google search, LinkedIn focused with a little bit of dabbling in Facebook and Instagram for the awareness. But like probably many of the B2B listeners or podcast listeners are talking about, B2B enterprise tends to stay away from those other ones because most of the time you're not going to be spending those high value ticket items through a social media like that. LinkedIn is probably more aligned because of the business culture that they have there, and Google search because part of our customer journey is making sure that we're part of their customer journey. So when they discover they have a problem and they're Googling, how do I automate FP&A or something like that, we're on top of mind. So we tend to stick with those two channels, which are Google search and LinkedIn. And then on the other side, ABM marketing is pretty heavy as well. So we tend to focus on certain clients, certain accounts, and we go after them knowing that we can provide you value, and here's why. And we create nurture sequences and BDR outreach sequences from that.
And what would you say? What role does the website play? So go limelight.com and on it here right now. What role do you think it plays in the overall journey for the folks to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. The role that the website plays is pivotal. We're actually transitioning away from traditional forums and form fills over to chatbots and over to more what I call education first marketing. So rather than having things gated for the goal of typical form fills, like to encourage booking a demo or contact us or getting a quote, we tend to rely on the chatbot for those things so that humans can interact with humans right away. We don't have to have that whole dance with download a white paper and then go over and talk to somebody afterwards. We just cut the middleman out and we talk to the person right away. So the website is heavily focused on education first. And then we kind of go from there and think about lead gen and all that stuff. But our lead gen strategy is based very, very heavily on our growth strategy.
Yeah, makes sense. So that education first approach is a strength of the page. Like every marketer I have on the show, they're always very critical on their own website. Where do you see on the flip side sort of the biggest room for improvement, or where do you want to develop the website towards? To what type of things do you have in mind?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a growth mindset. So basically what we're trying to do is figure out these unknown unknowns. A large portion of what we try to do at Limelight or in SaaS in general really is trying to educate people on why this new technology is going to revolutionize their lives. But what we run into at Limelight is, for example, Excel, which is our main competitor at this point. A lot of finance people during school and during their growing up in their career will always be using Excel. And so they don't really know what their problems are because they've developed coping mechanisms. Oh, Excel can't do that. They don't really know that there are other options out there. They just come to accept the limitations of Excel because they've learned it from the beginning to end. So what we need to do and what we have done is really, really describe, here's what Excel does, here's what it can do, and here's why Limelight is able to expedite data aggregation or data gathering, expedite analytics, and why it's better in Limelight or a dedicated platform and not Excel with add-ons and other kind of material. So we're a little bit different from that way as well.
Okay, that's super interesting. Now, obviously, a situation like this where you have like a major a tool that they're very used to, obviously, that in order to change behavior. How do you think about figuring out why people do or do not convert when they're on your website? Like, is there any tools, any methods, any methodologies that you've picked up in your career in marketing to look into why people wouldn't convert if they're already on the website?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of those things are how we align marketing goals with sales goals. Marketing would typically be about contact generation or lead generation, but at Limelight and the way that I'm running the team, it's about aligning with sales. So we want people that'll book a demo, show up for the demo, and ideally sales will be confident enough to align pipeline dollars with that call. Hopefully that call went well and we've actually teed up a really good prospect for them. And so that's where that education first mindset comes in. And that's why we do it in that way. And because we do it in that way, we're able to figure out, well, we're not getting as many demo requests as we did previously when we did an A/B test, for example. And so we're able to quickly understand where our demo requests have gone down and sales is telling us that we're not getting as high quality leads. So now we got to go back and do another A/B test to figure it out. And that way we gain this market intelligence from doing A/B testing as opposed to just being about lead gen. And the benefit of having an external party, which is sales, chime in and tell us, hey, we're not having luck with these leads. The benefit is that we're not drinking our own Kool-Aid in marketing. We're not just saying, oh, we generated leads, great, MQLs have been generated, let's move on and forget about it. We don't want to think about it that way because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if they show up and we have 100,000 contacts in our database. If none of them are booking a demo, we're not generating business. So for us, it always comes down to, can we make them book a demo? Have we educated them enough for a demo? And if not, where is that education gap in the customer journey to actually get them to that next step?
Yeah, that makes sense. Super interesting. In the show, a thing that recently comes up with more and more marketers. I mean, very often it's from sort of the e-commerce side of things, but maybe I'm curious what you think. Obviously, the cookieless future, right? Google is going to remove third-party cookies mid-end next year. Is that something that is already sort of in conversations? Do you think that's something that's going to be coming up more like next year? Like, how do you, as a marketer, look at that?
We are already feeling the effects of it. So basically, because people are well aware of what Google and Facebook do from a data collection perspective, most people will say, yeah, I don't want my cookies tracked. Yes, I don't want, default the browser to being no tracking, no cross-site tracking. And then we have companies like Apple with their private relay, which obfuscate IPs, and VPNs becoming way more popular. So for us, we tend to focus on that human interaction to cover up anything that the cookie would miss. And because at least at the end of the day, the walled garden, so Google search will have its data and we can kind of gather that data. LinkedIn will have its data and we can gather that data. It's not as easy to do cross promotion and remarketing with that information anymore, but luckily we can at least export the data, figure out the demographics that are visiting us on LinkedIn, figure out the keyword searches that are being figured out on Google search, and see if it actually aligns with our brand value, our brand messaging, if it aligns with our positioning. And from there, we're able to then enhance what we're doing in marketing to align with that without necessarily relying on cookies. And the other benefit, because we're moving over to this chatbot situation, honestly, this was one of the driving factors of it. Because humans are talking to other humans, we can go and talk to sales and say, hey, what did you notice about this one sale I saw in HubSpot that the chat didn't go that well, or it did go really well? What kind of changed it up? And we can use that to then bolster new marketing messaging or new marketing copy. And it kind of gives us that market research element that we're going to be missing from the cookieless world that we're going to go into.
Very cool. I want to wrap it up with some rapid fire questions. Are you ready for those?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the last book you read or the last podcast you listened to?
That's a tough one. Usually I listen to one called Front Burner, which is a CBC radio podcast. It's a Canadian version of The Daily, essentially, and that one I'm constantly listening to. Another one, most of my podcast listening happens on YouTube, so most of them are related to science-related stuff. Right now, I'm listening to one called SciShow, which is tons of science-related documents, or tons of science-related videos and stuff. But yeah, that's mainly where I focus most of my time.
What's one single thing your company is focused on the most at the moment?
Yeah, that's figuring out that unknown variable. So figuring out how can we express where Excel is falling short, that we are an Excel replacement. We're not an Excel add-on. We're not an Excel addition. We're a complete Excel replacement for the finance team, but how do we communicate why that's better? And so that's our biggest challenge right now. And basically, based on everything I said earlier, we're gathering data through people to kind of answer those questions.
If there would be no boundaries in tech, everything is possible. What's the one thing you would fix for your role today?
Oh, if anything was possible. Figuring out a way to have targeted advertisement without invading people's privacy. I think that would probably be the number one thing that I would love to be able to see, to give people control over their privacy, to say, I don't want, my neighborhood level of data. I want it, let's say, obfuscated to my country, because you don't need to know where I live. My country's fine. And then give them other kinds of control where they can say, I don't want to reveal my gender. I don't want to reveal my age, for example, or if I have a dog or a cat. And so from that stuff, I would love for the world to go where people can control their information, but marketers and companies can still communicate with people and still get their message out there. Because at the end of the day, companies are going to be driving commerce and economies, and we need that to happen. And if we just tend to not being able to communicate with them, or if marketing can't be effective, then businesses are going to suffer. Countries will suffer. It'll be an issue. But regardless, I think giving people control over their privacy is probably the number one thing I would love to see.
What's the last thing that kept you awake at night about the company?
About Limelight? Interesting. Honestly, it would be lead gen in general, just because that's on top of mind for us. How do we book more demos? How do we get more demos? How do we get healthier demos and healthier lists? Because of the way that we tend to structure our lead gen, we think about it from a lead multiplier or individual tactic, and we tend to think about lead multipliers like revamping our website. So we want to do those things, which will then compound other channel tactics, and do less individual tactics, which are just one-off, like Christmas emails or Thanksgiving. So that's probably what keeps me up at night, is trying to figure out what other lead multipliers, how else can I multiply the channel tactics that we're already doing, and that's what keeps me up at night.
And for the very last question, I want to do a bit of time travel with you. Let's go back to the days of Carleton University. And basically, right, so you're just heading out of, formal education into the world of growth. And, you very quickly were into digital marketing and paid marketing. And basically, I'm curious to know, what's the one advice you would give yourself heading off out of formal education?
Yeah, I think the number one thing would be to study more up on the customer journey and to really think about marketing from a customer journey perspective. I tend to now think about it from the entire leg of the customer journey. So when we look at it, we think about the moment of truth marketing that Google came up with a while ago. So the first moment of truth, zero moment of truth. And for us, we want to really highlight the post-purchase gap and the discovery phase, where people actually figure out, where did that problem come from? What triggered you to Google that you want to find a situation like Limelight? So if I were to tell my earlier self, I would say focus on that psychological element. How do you figure out where people's problems come from, and focus on people first? The metrics and all the other data and everything will come second, but focusing on people and how they interact with the web and how they interact with buying journeys is probably where I would have told myself to focus most of my energy.
Yeah, makes sense. For basically wrapping up the show, I want to give you the very last word. What's the one thing that people should remember about Limelight if they forget anything else that we discussed today?
Yeah, we want to transform the role of finance by providing accessible financial automation for every business. So as you can probably tell, we are very people focused first with our customer journey and education first. mindset in marketing, but that also goes with our product design as well. So people first, we want to replace Excel because we know and have identified bottlenecks within that operational workflow. And so we want to be able to empower financial teams to provide more value to their companies, provide more insights to their companies, and also get work done quicker, faster, and more productively.
Thanks a lot for being a guest on Pathfund Presents.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.